The MC's carefully maintained face bloomed into a wide chrysanthemum of a smile, his voice buzzing through the microphone and echoing across the wedding venue, which had been decorated to look like a giant pink cotton candy. Distinguished guests, dear friends, the auspicious hour has arrived. He drew out the tone, his gaze like a searchlight, precisely sweeping to the end of the red carpet, to the empty spot beside the groom where the bride should have been standing. Let's give the warmest applause. Please welcome our beautiful bride, Miss Sophia. Clap, clap, clap. The applause sounded polite enough. Unfortunately, it was applause that landed on silence. At the far end of the red carpet, it was empty. Only a few pink rose petals stirred by the air conditioning floated there, drifting around. Ethan, the groom today, stood there in that outrageously expensive, breath-stealing custom suit. My face was forced into a "I've got everything under control" smile, while the little man inside me had already started dancing wildly to the soundtrack of Liang Liang. Fuck! From the guest seats, that buzzing immediately drowned out the earlier applause. It was like poking a hornet's nest. Where are they? The bride? Ran off. TSK, the Johnsons have really lost face this time. I heard Miss Sophia is a workaholic. Surely not. Those murmured comments, like tiny needles, prickled all over my back. I stood on the stage feeling like a fool stripped naked and set loose running through Times Square. The smile on my face was about to fall apart, my muscles twitching a little. Damn Sophia, can this marriage even go ahead? At that moment my phone in my pocket vibrated. Not a call, a message. I fumbled it out like clutching at a lifeline and unlocked it. The screen's glare made me squint. Sender, Sophia's assistant, Luna. The message was concise and to the point, carrying that familiar Sophia-style cold efficiency. Mr. Ethan, Miss Sophia is still in the conference room. The other party suddenly raised the stakes, and the negotiations have entered the most critical phase. Miss Sophia asked me to tell you, the ceremony can start first. Follow the procedure. You can marry the ring for now. She will come over as soon as she finishes here. Marry the ring first. I stare at that line of text, my eyes nearly popping out. A wicked heat shot up from the soles of my feet straight to the top of my head. It burned through me until every organ felt like it was sizzling. Sophia, you really are something. Take your contract and go. I jerked my head up and scanned the audience. One face after another was written with curiosity, inquiry, schadenfreude, sympathy, and my mom Margaret in the front row, deathly pale and about to burst into tears. The master of ceremonies was flustered too, clutching the microphone as sweat trickled down his temple. The bride may have had a bit of a traffic jam on the way. Everyone please remain calm. Remain calm. Traffic jam? My ass. She's stuck at the negotiation table, isn't she? That wicked fire rampaged through my chest, burning the strings of my reason with a snap. To hell with dignity. To hell with the procedure. To hell with Sophia. I split my mouth open, showing an expression that couldn't possibly be called a smile. My teeth probably bared. My gaze was like a knife, stabbing toward the bridesmaids. Among the bridesmaids stood a little thing that didn't fit in. Chloe, that distant cousin Sophia. Rumor has it she flew back from some obscure corner abroad. Just come of age? Hard to tell. Today she insisted on being a bridesmaid, wearing an eye-searing pink Lolita poof dress, layers of lace that could hide two cats. On her head perched a huge pink bow that made you dizzy. Right now she was blinking those overly large eyes, looking at the farce on stage with a mix of excitement and bewilderment, mouth slightly open like an SD doll who wandered into a human wedding. You it is. On impulse, I didn't care about consequences. To everyone's astonished stares, I strode down from the dais in big steps, with a reckless, cast-it-all-aside fierceness, charging straight at the bridesmaid squad. Red carpet? Who cares? The MC's exclamation? Background music. My aim was precise. I seized Chloe's wrist, thin as if it would snap with a bend. It felt cold to the touch, with that slightly slick quality unique to girls. Chloe gave a short cry. her big eyes rounding wide in utter disbelief. I don't have time for appreciating that. I gave a hard tug and ripped her out of the bridesmaids crowd. The movement was so rough, it lacked any grace. The huge pink skirt swooshed across a bridesmaid's calf and almost sent her tumbling. "Ethan, are you crazy?" My best friend Jake's voice cracked as it came from the head table. I plugged my ears to everything. I grabbed Chloe, like grabbing an oversized humanoid doll, and in a few strides darted back to the center of the dais. I shoved her down where Sophia was supposed to have been standing, master of ceremonies. I turned my head and shouted at the MC, who had completely frozen, his jaw almost hitting the floor. My voice carried through the microphone across the hall, laced with a go-for-broke madness. "Proceed. Continue." The whole banquet hall was deathly silent. A silence so complete you could hear a needle drop and its echo. Everyone went dumbfounded, eyes wide as copper bells, mouths open wide enough to fit an egg. Even the background music sensibly stopped. Time seemed to freeze for a few seconds. Then boom, a roar 100 times more intense than before suddenly exploded, like pouring a ladle of cold water into a pot of boiling oil. Jesus Christ. Change brides. What kind of crazy plot twist is this? Who is that girl? Is she an adult? Ethan is awesome. What a daredevil. Hurry, take pictures. This is headline news. Click, 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 click. The phone flashes instantly merged into a vast, white sea, rising and falling, even brighter than the spotlights on the red carpet. Everyone seemed pumped full of adrenaline, wildly holding up their phones to shoot and record, afraid of missing a single thrilling moment. Social apps? Video platforms? With a scene like this today, if it doesn't trend, it would be an insult to the audience. I had Chloe by the arm, standing under the spotlight, and countless cameras, still dazed. That delicate, doll-like little face was first bewildered, then slowly flushed. A mist gathered in her big eyes, and her long lashes fluttered like a frightened butterfly's wings. She seemed to want to pull away from my hand, but she was too weak, and I held on tight. Ethan, she called me timidly, with a sob in her voice, the thin sound drowned by the enormous roar of noise. I glanced down at her. The girl's eyes were a little red, her nose tip reddened too, like a little rabbit scared out of its wits. A faint twinge of guilt began to surface, only to be immediately overwhelmed by a surging anger and a reckless urge to give up. "Shut up." I pressed my voice low and spat the words through my teeth, more as a warning to myself not to soften. "Stand still." The master of ceremonies finally recovered a sliver of professional composure from his shock, though his voice trembled badly. "Ethan, sir, this young lady, this part of the program, the bride's name is wrong." "Name?" I pulled a vicious smile, sweeping over the shocked, excited, disdainful faces in the audience. "The program is fixed. People are not. Today, I'm Ethan and I'm marrying her. What about it?" With my other hand, I suddenly pointed at Chloe, who was still in a state of fright, the motion so large I nearly poked her in the nose. "Fine, get married then." A clear, slightly petulant voice suddenly rang out, cutting over the clamor. "It's Chloe." She sniffed, blinked hard to wipe the moisture from her eyes, thrust out her small chest, and actually lifted her chin. The little face, still carrying baby fat, instantly shifted into a stubborn, I'm going all expression, even a bit excited. She grabbed my arm with a shocking strength. The pink Lolita skirt was stepped on by her and nearly caused her to trip, but she stood straight like a little poplar tree facing the wind and shouted to the host, "Continue." "Name? I am Chloe. Remember it." Her shout was both fierce and cute, crisp and loud. The scene fell eerily silent for a moment. The next second, even louder uproar and laughter nearly ripped the roof off. "Ha ha! Awesome. The girl has guts. This plot is insane. Are we watching a movie? Hurry. Is a live stream on? Send tips now." The flashbulbs went even crazier, practically blinding everyone. The master of ceremonies was completely stunned. Holding the cue card with Sophia written on it, his hands shook like he had Parkinson's. He looked toward my parents for help. My mother was already covering her face and crying. My father Daniel's face was ashen, his lips trembling, and he couldn't speak. My head was buzzing. Chloe's divine move had short-circuited my brain a bit. That girl really had a lot of nerve. Just then, bang! The two heavy solid wood doors of the banquet hall, decorated with flowers and balloons, let out a deafening crash. They weren't pushed open. It was kicked open from the outside, with the heel of a high-heeled shoe kicked open viciously, with such force that the door panel slammed into the wall, emitting a pained groan, shaking the flowers on the doorframe so they fell off in a flurry. The enormous roar instantly drowned out all the noise in the room. All the flashbulbs, all the comments, all the laughter were, as if someone had hit pause, abruptly stopped. Hundreds of pairs of eyes, all at once, and with incredulous astonishment, turned toward the doorway. The light at the door outlined a tall, sharp figure. Backlit, the face was indistinct. But the aura cast by that silhouette was like a blade freshly drawn, chilling, that instantly cleaved through the room's chaos and absurdity. High heels struck the polished marble with a crisp, hurried, utterly commanding tock, tock, tock. Each step sounded as if it were pressing on the heartbeat of everyone present. She walked very fast, carrying the scent of gunpowder as if she'd just stepped off the battlefield. Wearing a sharply tailored, wrinkle-free, pure black lady's suit dress, she traced out powerful, crisp lines. Her long hair was neatly pinned at the back of her head, revealing a smooth forehead and a cold, chiseled profile. On her earlobes, only two tiny, icy, sparkling diamond studs. It was Sophia, my fiancée. No, technically still my fiancée for now. Miss Sophia had finally arrived. She walked straight across the red carpet. The air about her was less like a bride's entrance and more like a queen's coronation, or a mob boss coming to clean house. Where she passed, guests parted as if pushed by an invisible force, automatically making a path for her. No one dared speak. Even their breathing grew quieter. She held no bouquet and wore no veil. Instead, she clutched a thick, bound document. On its cover, a conspicuous red confidential stamp was glaring. She didn't stop until she stood directly below the dais. Her high heels planted firmly, she lifted her chin slightly. Those eyes, so sharp they could pierce a person's heart, finally rose and precisely locked onto the figures of Chloe and me snuggled tightly together on the stage. Her gaze was icy, without a trace of warmth, as if looking at two failed exhibits displayed in a shop window. The entire banquet hall was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Hundreds of people held their breath. Even Chloe unconsciously loosened her grip on my hand and drew back behind me, yet couldn't help leaning out half a head, curious and wary as she watched that terrifyingly imposing woman on the floor. Sophia's gaze lingered on my face for a second. The look was so complex I couldn't read it. Then the corner of her mouth twitched upward very slightly. It wasn't a smile. It was mockery, contempt, the indifferent calm of someone in control. She raised her hand without a moment's hesitation and, as if tossing out the trash, flung the thick stack of documents in her hand forcefully toward where I was standing. The document traced a sharp parabola through the air and, with a crisp smack, landed precisely on the floor at my feet. A few pathetic rose petals splashed up. The force was so great it made the soles of my feet go numb. "Ethan." Sophia's voice sounded, cutting through the dead silence and carrying clearly into everyone's ears. Cold, calm, with not a ripple of emotion, yet bearing the weight of 1,000 pounds. "Who gave you permission to change the bride?" She spoke slowly and distinctly, each word like an ice-hardened nail driven into the ears of everyone present. My throat tightened, my heart raced, adrenaline spiked. Damn, when this woman's aura is fully on, she's fucking terrifying. I hadn't figured out how to snap back, or rather, I hadn't recovered from the shock of her airdrop document. Sophia had no intention of waiting for my answer. She turned her head slightly, her gaze still fixed on me, and lifted her chin toward the document on the floor, her tone as neutral as if discussing today's weather. This gift money, she paused, enunciating the two words clearly. Is it enough to cut someone off? Gift money. Cut someone off. Boom. The atmosphere that had just solidified was ignited again, even more explosive than before. Holy shit, holy shit, holy shit. Real gift money. A $10 million order used as gift money. Miss Sophia is badass. This move is hardcore, literally throwing money in the groom's face. Start fighting. Fight. Fight. Did anyone record this? Where's my phone? Camera flashes went crazy again, mixed with stifled gasps and commentary. This wedding was damn worth the ticket price. More thrilling than a primetime melodrama. I looked down at the document stamped confidential at my feet, feeling my face burn. Humiliated? Angry? And an indescribable suffocation? All right, Sophia. The negotiation table didn't hold you up, but you were right on time to stomp the place. Using the contract as a brick to smash me with? Impressive. I was just about to bend down, pick up that gift money, and hurl it back down while shouting, I don't want it. Before the words left my mouth, a pink figure whooshed past me. It was Chloe. That little girl had just been cowering behind me from fear, and now she was buzzing with energy, moving as fast as a little rabbit. She headed straight for the papers, didn't even glance at them, raised her foot in a white little leather shoe, and stamped hard on the contract worth $10 million that symbolized Sophia's great achievement. Smack! The soft sole of the little dress shoe landed squarely on the red confidential stamp. She even pressed down on it. Oomph. Chloe put her hands on her hips and, facing Sophia on stage whose presence filled the room, raised her exquisitely carved face that now plainly read, I'm not to be messed with. Her voice was crisp and bright, with a spoiled, bratty edge ringing through the hall. Seize this betrothal gift money of yours. She deliberately stretched out the syllables, a mischievous, provoking sparkle in her big eyes. Isn't nearly enough. Sophia's eyebrows twitched ever so slightly. Her expression remained icy, but there seemed to be a hint of scrutiny as her gaze fell on Chloe's excessively youthful face. Chloe showed no fear at all. She even shook her head triumphantly, the huge pink bow quivering along with it. Then, under the eyes of hundreds, she made a move that made everyone's eyeballs drop. Her small, fair hand, still carrying a bit of baby fat, slipped into her elaborate Lolita dress, into a very discreet side pocket trimmed with lace. She fumbled around a bit. He pulled out a card. It wasn't a bank card. The material looked heavier, with a restrained, matte metallic sheen. The face of the card was a deep black, without any bank logo. Only a ring of extremely fine, almost invisible dark gold thorny patterns around the edge, encircling an equally dark gold, extremely minimalist abstract letter S. Those who knew immediately gasped. Even those who didn't know felt there was something special about the card because it simply looked expensive, ostentatious. Chloe held the understatedly luxurious black card between two fingers and casually flipped it like a playing card. Her pink fingertips contrasted sharply with the deep black card. She looked at Sophia, her face wearing that proud, watch me show you how it's done expression. Her voice was sickeningly sweet, but what she said was earth-shattering. My pocket money, she paused, her big eyes curving into crescent moons as she showed an innocent yet devastating smile, is enough to buy your company. Enough to buy your company. Buy your company. Oh. The echo drifted through the deathly, silent banquet hall. Time and space seemed to freeze. Everyone went rigid. Their control over expressions completely collapsed. Mouths agape, eyes wide, phones dropped to the floor, rubbing their eyes, thinking they were hallucinating, a whole spectrum of human reactions, brilliant and varied. The half-lobster in Jake's hand, plop, fell onto the plate, sauce splattering all over him, utterly oblivious. My parents' expressions had shifted from angry and despairing to completely stunned and bewildered. Even the host on stage, seasoned in many battles, though probably not this kind, forgot to breathe, his mouth open wide enough to fit his own fist. Sophia, Miss Sophia, who had remained unflappable even with Mount Tai collapsing before her, finally showed a faint, clear crack in her millennia-frozen expression. Her sharp eyes were fixed on the black card in Chloe's hand. Her pupils contracted slightly. She recognized that card. Or rather, she recognized what that card represented. It wasn't something any ordinary Centurion black gold card could compare to. It was the kind of status symbol only core members of the world's top financial dynasty, the Sterling family, might possess, an invisible pass that granted unfettered access within a certain circle. The wealth and power it signified could not be summed up by phrases like "buy your company." It was a dimensional, crushing blow. For the first time, Sophia's breathing became visibly rapid. Her back remained straight and unmoved, but the knuckles of the hand clutching her clutch handbag were slightly white from the grip. The look she gave Chloe was no longer that of someone looking at an insolent young brat, but one filled with incredulous scrutiny and a faint, extremely subtle apprehension. This little girl in a pink Lolita dress who looks like a delicate doll. Who on earth is she? The deathly silence was broken by the grating sound of a chair leg scraping across the floor. Thud! Someone was so shocked their legs gave out and they collapsed to the ground. Immediately, an even louder commotion erupted like a tsunami. My God, what kind of card is that? Pocket money to buy a company? Is this fucking fairy tale Sophia's company? Valued at billions of dollars. Pocket money. What kind of background does this girl have? An alien, maybe? Today's wedding. Am I still asleep? Can someone pinch me? Hurry. Search. Who is Chloe? The flashbulbs went wild again, this time trained mainly on Chloe and the mysterious black card in her hand. The reporters, who'd somehow appeared from every corner, were like sharks smelling blood, pushing forward so hard their microphones nearly jabbed Chloe in the face. Miss Chloe, is what you just said true? Which family are you from? Could you reveal that? What exactly does this card represent? What is your relationship with Mr. Ethan? Chloe was slightly annoyed by the flashbulbs, frowning, shoved the black card into her small pocket, hid behind me, showing only half her head in the huge bow, and shouted so noisy, "Stop taking pictures. If you keep it up, I'll have security throw you out." Her threatening, pouty act, paired with that innocent, radiant face, had no intimidation at all. It only made her cuter. The whole scene completely fell apart. It was a chaotic, boiling mess. I stood at the center of the storm. To my left, my fiancée, an iceberg with a chill aura and knife-like eyes. To my right, a mysteriously identified, surprisingly outspoken Lolita dropped from the sky. Under my feet lay the $10 million contract that Chloe had stamped and certified. Absurd. Utterly absurd. I feel like a monkey being roasted over a fire. All my anger and grievance have been shredded to pieces by this surreal reality. There's only one thought left in my head. What the hell is going on here? Just as the chaos reached its peak and everything was about to spiral out of control. Enough! A clear, commanding exclamation with an unquestionable piercing power rose above the clamor. It was Sophia. She took a deep breath, and every emotion that had shown on her face instantly retreated, reverting her to that cool, rational, in-control Miss Sophia. Only deep in her eyes lingered a remnant of the storm that had not yet fully subsided. She didn't look at Chloe again. Her gaze passed over her, like two cold spotlights, locking firmly onto my face. Ethan. Her voice returned to that business-like chill, but with an unprecedented weariness and a barely perceptible rasp. This farce should end. She paused, looking at me with a complex expression as if appraising me and as if making a difficult decision. Come with me. She spat the 3 words decisive. Now, immediately, not a suggestion, an order. Just like when she was giving orders to those subordinates in the conference room. A nameless rage flared up again. Why? Why is it always you who gets to decide? You were late to the wedding, the negotiation was more important than me, and now it's come to this. and still you can just say, "Come with me." And that's it? To you, what exactly am I, Ethan? An object to be summoned and dismissed at will? Go with you. I sneered, my voice low, but amplified by the microphone, so it carried clearly. Miss Sophia, go where? Back to your negotiation table? Or to the next signing ceremony? What am I to you, Ethan? Someone to occupy your precious schedule. My words were like poisoned needles, mercilessly striking. Sophia's face drained of color in an instant. She pressed her lips tightly together, her jawline taut like a blade. That's not what you think. Her voice shot up suddenly, carrying a trace of urgency and grievance. She might not even have noticed. That contract, it was for... She cut herself off abruptly, as if there was something unspeakable, a flicker of struggle and pain crossing her eyes. For the first time, the cold, domineering exterior showed such a clear crack. For what? I stared at her, closing in step by step. The anger in my heart and the long-accumulated resentment had found an outlet. To prove that you, Miss Sophia, are omnipotent, to sign a major deal on the wedding day, so your business empire can shine even brighter? Sophia, in your mind, what really matters? My accusation struck the dead silent air like a hammer. The guests all held their breath. Even Chloe quieted, her big eyes rolling between me and Sophia, glancing at one, then the other. Sophia's body shuddered almost imperceptibly. She looked into my eyes, which churned with too many emotions: anger, hurt, disbelief, and a bottomless fatigue and a kind of near-desperate sorrow. She opened her mouth as if to say something, but not a single word came out. Only those eyes, always sharp as a hawk's, were now glazed with a clear sheen of moisture, faintly shimmering in the light. She abruptly turned her face away and no longer looked at me. Her shoulders were rigid, as if desperately restraining something. The entire banquet hall was left with nothing but the heavy sound of breathing. A few seconds of silence stretched on as long as a century. A very soft chuckle escaped Sophia's throat, laden with endless mockery and bitterness. She slowly turned her head back. The fragility and struggle on her face had vanished, leaving only a resolute, icy calm that stretched 1,000 miles. All right. She spoke just one word. Clear, cold, without the slightest ripple. Then she stopped looking at me, stopped looking at anyone. She straightened her spine like a queen about to walk to the scaffold, stepped in those still sharp high heels, and turned away. Duh. The crisp footsteps struck the marble floor again. This time, they carried an irrevocable finality. She crossed the silent crowd and walked toward the grand door she had kicked open. The light at the entrance traced her solitary silhouette, as if severing her completely from the chaos behind her. Just as she was about to step out the door. Wait! A crisp, slightly stubborn voice sounded. Chloe popped out from behind me, ran a few steps onto the red carpet, and stood in front of Sophia. The pink hem of her dress looked like a blooming flower. Sophia stopped, looking down at the little girl who hadn't even reached her shoulders, her gaze cold and shaded with a hint of irritation at being disturbed. Chloe tilted her little face up, meeting Sophia's eyes without any fear. She didn't look at Sophia so much as reach out toward the assistants and bodyguards behind her, who were following and likewise preparing to leave, all wearing the same stern expressions. Hey, you! She pointed at the nervous female assistant Luna behind Sophia, who was holding a tablet. You, give me the tablet. Luna froze and instinctively looked at Sophia. Sophia frowned, said nothing, which counted as tacit approval. Luna hesitated and handed the tablet over. Chloe took the tablet, her little finger poking and prodding across it so fast it was dizzying. A few seconds later, she flipped the screen around, held it up high, almost thrusting it into Sophia's face. There! Look for yourself. Chloe's voice had a hint of pride and a touch of exasperation. So stupid. Always only cares about work. Nearly got sold out and was still counting the money for them. On the tablet screen was, to Sophia's shock, the electronic version of the $10 million contract she had just smashed. But now Chloe had circled several places on the screen with a conspicuous red marker. They were all extremely hidden trap clauses, deeply buried within lengthy legal terms. Here, the third-page footnote in the addendum. See it? Tiny print. So small it's like an ant. It says, final interpretation rights and 60% of subsequent derivative profits belong to party. Black and white. It'll bury you. And here, the breach clause. If they breach, they only owe you $3 million. That's pocket change. If you breach, you have to pay 200% of the project's expected profits. How could you sign that, sis? Where's your head? Look at this one. Delivery standards. Vague as hell. They'll just throw some junk at you later, and you won't even have anywhere to cry. Chloe's little mouth jabbered, her words firing like a machine gun, precisely pointing at the part she'd highlighted in red on the screen. Each time she pointed, she punctuated it with a crisp trap or idiot. She looked exactly like a little teacher who had caught a student making mistakes, both angry and flustered. At first, Sophia was extremely impatient, but when she clearly saw the highlighted content on the screen and heard Chloe's unceremonious corrections, the frost on her face began to crack bit by bit. Shocked. Unbelievable. She snatched the tablet, her fingers flying as she swiped and zoomed in on the marked clauses. The more she read, the paler her face became, her lips pressed tighter and tighter until she was almost colorless. These traps, she had completely failed to notice them. Or rather, the other side had hidden them so deeply, and with the negotiation dragged out repeatedly and the final stage extreme pressure, she, trying desperately to sign this order before the wedding because it was crucial to Taylor Innovations, was so tightly wound that she somehow overlooked them. Cold sweat instantly soaked her back. A terrifying chill shot from the soles of her feet to the top of her head. If this contract were to actually take effect, the enormous losses and the passive position that would follow would be enough to cripplingly damage the company she had worked so hard to build for years, and might even allow the other side to eat away at it step by step. Luna stepped closer to look, her face turning as pale as paper in an instant. Sophia. Miss Sophia, this. Sophia suddenly lifted her head, no longer looking at Chloe, but turning to me. Her eyes were filled with lingering fear, shock, and indescribable complexity, and a faint, belated guilt that had finally dawned on her. Ethan, her voice was harshly dry, noticeably trembling. I said nothing. I just watched her quietly, watched the frozen lake in her eyes finally crack, revealing the surging, genuine emotions beneath. So that's it. So she had fought to sign this big deal before the wedding, not just out of a workaholic instinct. Perhaps, in her subconscious, she also wanted to use this weighty report card as a belated, clumsy offering to our marriage. Only she had almost sacrificed herself and the company. Anger and resentment, like a punctured balloon, whooshed out most of their air. In their place came an indescribable sourness and pity. Damn. I really am a glutton for punishment. PFT. An ill-timed little laugh broke the heavy atmosphere. It was Chloe. She walked up to me with her hands clasped behind her back, like a little grown-up, tilting her head as she looked at Sophia, whose face was deathly pale and still shaken. Then at me with my complicated expression, mischief written all over her small face. TSK. She shook her head and sighed with an air of old-fashioned judgment. A workaholic who almost sold herself, and a silly groom who nearly exploded with anger and married his cousin. She extended her fair, delicate fingers and pointed first at Sophia, then at me. You too, she drawled, her big eyes sparkling with slyness. One dares to sign, the other dares to get angry. Truly a match made in heaven and arranged on earth. Absolutely perfect. The two words, perfect match, she pronounced loudly and clearly, with a touch of small pride. Puffed. Somewhere in the audience, someone couldn't hold it in and burst out laughing. Immediately, as if a fuse had been lit, the laughter swept through the banquet hall like a tide. All the previous tension, awkwardness, and shock were completely washed away by Chloe's brilliant line. Ha ha! A perfect match. Spot on. Young lady nailed it. Isn't it just a perfect match? This is hilarious. The workaholic and the silly groom. So apt. This wedding was worth it. Totally worth it. The flashbulbs popped again, but this time the air was full of joy. The reporters broke into laughter too, already drafting headlines. Wedding scene turns into business battle lesson. Mysterious Lolita wakes the domineering CEO. Sophia was a little dazed by the sudden laughter and Chloe's blunt commentary. Her face flushing pale then dark. The cold, proud facade she'd been forcing couldn't hold, and she unusually showed a few traces of embarrassment. I looked at her rare, somewhat flustered expression, and then at the frightened look she'd worn moments ago when she almost fell into that trap. The last bit of resentment in my heart seemed to loosen all of a sudden. I sighed and rubbed my throbbing temple. What a chaotic day this has been. Then, under the gaze of hundreds of eyes, under Chloe's mischievous look, and amid the booming laughter, I reached out my hand toward Sophia. Not to accuse, not in anger. Just reaching out my hand. Sophia froze, staring blankly at my outstretched hand, then at my face, her eyes full of uncertainty and a tentative glimmer of hope. I said nothing, only extended my hand a little further, my fingers curling slightly. The meaning was clear. Come here. The teasing laughter gradually died down. Everyone held their breath and watched. Sophia's lips trembled, and her eyes seemed to redden again. She lowered her head, blinked quickly a few times, and when she raised it, her face looked as if a great weight had been lifted. She didn't hesitate at all. If anything, she seemed a little eager. She stepped forward and gently, steadily, placed her hand into my palm. It was slightly cool, with a faint sweat and a barely noticeable tremor. I squeezed hard, very hard. Her hand was very small, feeling so fragile in the palm of my hand. Hey, hey, hey. Chloe's dissatisfied voice sounded beside us. She had her hands on her hips and tilted her chin up. That's it. We're done. Boring. I'm not finished yet. My black card hasn't had a chance to be used. She stamped her foot in a huff, the pink hem of her dress swaying. I ignored her, took Sophia's hand, drew her close to me, and stood side by side with her. Then I took a deep breath, turned to the MC who was still questioning life, and shouted with all my might, my voice loud and carrying a decisive finality. MC, program, new, begin. This time, I squeezed the cool little hand in my palm, turned to look at Sophia. She was looking up at me, her eyes sparkling like they were full of stars. I grinned and announced loudly into the microphone. The bride has real, L.Y. Arrived. Oh, the audience instantly erupted into a thunderous roar of cheers, applause, and whistles. 100 times more enthusiastic than at the opening. The music swelled again at the right moment. That familiar, solemn wedding procession. This time, at the end of the red carpet, the groom and the bride stood side by side. Although the bride's suit was a bit wrinkled, the groom's smile a little silly, and there was a sulking little third wheel in a pink Lolita dress standing beside them. But who cares? The MC was so moved he had tears in his eyes. His voice choked. Probably relieved his job was safe. Respected guests. Let's once again give the most enthusiastic applause. Welcome our beautiful bride, Miss Sophia, and our handsome groom, Mr. Ethan. Ceremony complete. Quiche, quiche, quiche. The jeers from the audience rose like a tidal wave. I looked at Sophia. Under the lights, a charming flush stained her fair face. Her long lashes drooped, a little shy. There wasn't a trace left of the cold, iceberg-like CEO from a moment ago. I smiled and lowered my head. She also stood slightly on tiptoe and came up to meet me. At the moment our lips touched, soft, slightly cool, with a faint saltiness, probably from the tears I couldn't hold back, and the sweet relief of surviving a crisis. A small, spoiling note of disdain came from beside us. So sticky, it's nauseating. It was Chloe. She covered her eyes, though her fingers were spread wide. watching with obvious relish. Applause, laughter, cheers, music, all intertwined, filling the entire space. A chaotic beginning, a bizarre interlude, a crisis that nearly fell apart. In the end, it all condensed into the real warmth in the palm of my hand and the clumsy, yet resolute sweetness on my lips. All right, life is like the contract Sophia signed, full of pitfalls, but as long as you have someone by your side who can spot a trap at a glance, even if it's a little girl, and someone willing to take your hand amid the chaos, maybe life can still be lived steaming and warm. The private little banquet after the wedding was set in my living room, the one that had been wrecked once but was barely put back together to look presentable. There weren't many people, just a few of my closest brothers and a handful of Sophia's core girlfriends. Chloe flitted around like an energetic little butterfly, buzzing from one place to another. One moment clinging to Jake to ask about games, the next darting off to check out the new manicure one of Sophia's friends had done. The atmosphere finally returned to a relatively warm, lively normal. Sophia and I were planted on the main sofa. She'd taken off that battle flag of a suit jacket and was wearing only the silk white blouse beneath. She'd undone one button at the collar, revealing a pretty collarbone, and had relaxed into the couch, a glass of champagne in her hand. Under the lights, there was a languid, survived a storm kind of weary beauty in her eyes and expression. So, I turned toward her, leaned in a little, lowering my voice with a hint of settling accounts after the harvest, and lightly tapped the back of her hand that rested on her knee. What the hell was up with that contract that nearly screwed us? Sophia's body stiffened almost imperceptibly. She lowered her eyelids, stared at the golden bubbles in her glass, and was silent for a few seconds. When she looked up again, her gaze was frank, with a touch of regret and tenderness. The other party is Vanguard Capital, with deep connections and rough methods. Her voice was very soft, a little hoarse. They've had their eyes on our newly developed AI medical imaging diagnostic system for a long time. Negotiations dragged on for months, stuck on the ownership of the core patent and the subsequent revenue split. She took a sip of wine, as if gathering her words. Last week, they suddenly relented and made a big concession on the revenue split, but insisted the contract had to be signed today. That is, on our wedding day. Their excuse was that their big boss is flying abroad tomorrow and won't be back for months. She gave a self-mocking laugh. A clumsy excuse, right? But at the time, I was dazed by that concession, and besides, she paused, glanced at me, guilt in her eyes, and I was anxious inside, wanted to finish quickly so I could hurry back. She took a deep breath. In the last 2 days, they pushed like crazy, constantly slipping in new clauses. All those supplemental agreements that look trivial but are actually landmines. My team and I pulled 2 all-nighters, totally on edge, just thinking that once we signed this big present, it would at least be worth it. She trailed off, but we all understood. In the end, you almost lost yourself over it. I finished for her. There was no reproach in my voice, only lingering fear. I took her hand. It was a little cold. Yeah. She nodded, then squeezed my hand back hard, her knuckles whitening. Luckily, Chloe. She looked toward the other side of the living room, where Chloe was handling one of Jake's treasured figures, making Jake turn green. That kid. I followed her gaze and couldn't help but grin. What on earth is her background? Pocket money enough to buy your company? That card. Sophia leaned close to me, almost pressing against my ear, and whispered a name in a breath only we could hear. A surname that only appears on the covers of the world's top financial magazines and in some extremely secretive family legacy reports. Sterling. I sucked in a breath, nearly choking on my own saliva. What the hell? I exclaimed, staring at the little pink figure still tormenting the Jake figurine. She's the Sterling family's little princess? Sophia nodded, her expression complicated. I only found out recently, too. Her mom is a very distant cousin of my mother's. As far removed as you can get. She came back this time, supposedly running away from home, experiencing life. Her family has been frantic. She stole her brother's ID card to go out. Run away from home. Experience life. I remembered her at the wedding pulling out the black card and saying pocket money. I was speechless and a lump rose in my throat. That experience was seriously hardcore. However, Sophia looked at my shocked expression and suddenly smiled, with a relieved, post-traumatic sort of air and a hint of slyness. Thanks to her, that big gift is completely off the table. Vanguard Capital must be in a terrible state right now. She rattled her phone. Luna just got the news. Marcus Reed, the head of Vanguard Capital, has been frantically calling to apologize, saying there was a major misunderstanding in the contract and begging to renegotiate. He's never been so humble. I couldn't help but laugh out loud. You steal the chicken and lose the rice. Serve them right. The last bit of gloom that contract had cast over me finally lifted. So, Sophia put down her glass, turned to face me. Under the light, her eyes shone astonishingly, with a tenderness I had never seen before. She took my hand, her fingertips gently tracing the plain band on my ring finger. Ethan, her voice was soft but clear, I'm sorry for making you worry. And thank you, she paused, seeming a little embarrassed, but her gaze was steady. Thank you for reaching out at the end. My heart felt as if something had lightly bumped it, leaving it all soft and gooey. For what? I squeezed her fingers and grinned. Who else? But you would be my perfect match. A workaholic paired with a fool of a groom. It's only natural. Sophia laughed at my teasing. The smile was so bright it dazzled. She lightly thumped me. Get lost. The mood was just right. Hey. A spoilsport, saccharine voice cut in. Chloe had somehow wandered to the back of our sofa, clutching Jake's limited edition Iron Man figure, her little head poking over the back of the couch, her big eyes darting between the two of us with a mischievous grin. Made up? No more fighting? She asked, pretending not to know. Then her face turned serious as she mimicked an adult and solemnly scolded Sophia. Cousin, I'm not saying this to criticize you. Next time you have such an important negotiation, she blinked her big eyes, speaking earnestly and deliberately emphasizing the word important. Remember, bring a folding bed into the conference room. She stuck out her pale, delicate finger and jabbed the air forcefully, imitating the old pedant. You can lose a negotiation. You can't miss a wedding. Got it? You're so dumb. A folding bed. Ha 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 ha. An earth-shattering burst of laughter erupted in the living room. Even Jake, who had always been careful with the figurines, was laughing so hard he kept slapping his thigh. Sophia's face flushed bright red in an instant, the color reaching her earlobes. She covered her face, her shoulders shaking with laughter, embarrassed and flustered, completely devoid of her usual I-see-so demeanor. I looked at the laughing crowd, then at Sophia beside me, her face hidden and ears crimson, and at Chloe draped over the back of the sofa, proudly swinging her big bow. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, warm on the floor, the air still holding the sweet scents of champagne and cake. The messy opening, the jaw-dropping turn of events, the near-collapse crisis. In the end, all of it transformed into the real warmth in our palms at this moment, the unrestrained laughter in our ears, and the steaming, chaotic, yet utterly comforting, everyday human life. This day is fucking awesome.